As people get older, they start to solve problems differently. Let me give you an example of a dilemma and just think about how you might respond to it. You are a member of your university's Student Judicial Board and are currently hearing a case involving plagiarism. The student handbook states plagiarism is a serious offense resulting in expulsion. The student accused of plagiarizing a paper admits copying from Wikipedia, but says she's never been told she needed to use a formal citation and quotation marks. Do you vote to expel the student? So just take a minute and think about your response. Okay, now take a minute and think about what your response might have been when you were early in adolescence. Do you think that your thinking becomes more black and white as you get older? Like there's a clear right and a clear wrong to every question? Or do you think that you become a little bit more comfortable with the gray as you get older? What we see is that for the most part, people start to get a little bit more comfortable with the gray. So we see that people start to integrate emotion and logic in life problems. So in post-formal thinking, decision-making and problem-solving emphasize change and context-dependent principles instead of conformity and context-free principles. So people realize that they might not be right just because they experienced something, that other people's experiences are different, and so they can't know who is right. They need to understand and know what the context is. Adults start to understand that there's more than one right answer. As people age, adults tend to make decisions and analyze problems not so much on logical grounds anymore, but rather on more pragmatic and emotional grounds. And then the integration of emotion with logic provides the basis for decision making in very personal and sometimes very difficult arenas of love and work. So this is an example of post-formal thinking. So the takeaway here, you guys, is basically that as you get older, you start to kind of become a little bit more relative in your thinking. You need to understand what the context is. You are relying more on your emotions rather than logic alone. You are more comfortable with the gray. Again, you're more comfortable with the gray. You don't need to have absolute right and wrong in every situation. So going beyond formal operations, you can see that thinking in adulthood really does become less black and white. So post-formal thought is characterized by a recognition that truth may vary from one situation to another, and that solutions must be realistic. Ambiguity and contradiction now are more the rule, and emotion and subjectivity play a role in thinking. So post-formal thinking has its origins in young adulthood. And one description of development of thinking in adulthood is reflective judgment. This is a way in which adults reason through dilemmas involving current affairs, religion, science, personal relationships, and other things like that. So we see that there's a systematic progression of reflective judgment. So the first kind of stage here would be pre-reflective thought. And this is where people don't acknowledge, they might not even perceive that knowledge is uncertain. They don't understand that there are some problems that exist that don't have a clear or correct answer. So that's pre-reflective thought. Quasi-reflective reasoning is where there's this recognition that nothing can be known for certain, and the situation, the evidence might cause them to change the conclusion. So it's kind of like, if you remember back to identity development, quasi-reflective reasoning kind of maps onto moratorium, where you're searching, but haven't committed, whereas pre-reflective thought kind of maps onto foreclosure, where you're committed, but you've never really done any searching. And then reflective reasoning is this understanding that people construct knowledge using evidence and argument after careful analysis of the problem or situation. So this is like your identity achievement, except this is more in terms of thinking and thought. So here, you might once again hold firm convictions, but you're reaching them only after very carefully considering other viewpoints. And then you also are realizing that you need to continually reevaluate your beliefs in the face of new evidence. So, I think a good example of this can be like the development of your own political views. So in this pre-reflective reasoning stage, this might be like when you're in middle school and maybe you have, but maybe you have never really like researched different political views. You're just like, well, my parents say that they're Republican, so I'm Republican too, but you don't even really know what that means. And then with quasi-reflective reasoning might be where you start to become a little bit uncertain about it. And so you don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other. You're still kind of looking. And then reflective reasoning would be where you're like, okay, well, this is now my political views and here's the reason for it. But you're also okay with people challenging those views. And you're okay getting into those discussions, and you're okay reevaluating your political views.